Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone once again. This is Parliamentarians for Global Action trying to convene yet another meeting on Afghanistan at a time in which, of course, the conversation has probably not has been as satisfactory and complete as we would have wanted. So we try to fill the gap. And without further ado, I am David Donat-Cattin, the Secretary General of PGA, Parliamentarians for Global Action. I'm giving the floor to the President of PGA, connecting from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Honorable Kasturi Patto, Member of Parliament from Malaysia. Kasturi, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, David, for that introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We watched in horror and disbelief on the 15th of August 2021 of the Taliban recapturing not just Afghanistan, but also bore witness to the catastrophic situation of justice, democracy, civil liberties, human rights, including the rights of women and children, press freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and of universal values, and the increase of impunity. We observe the rise of authoritarian rule, oppressing the voices of conscience, particularly the voices of women, shrouded behind a veil that preaches religion but does the contrary. After more than 9 months, do we still flinch at images and videos of men, women, and children stripped of their human dignity at the hands of extremists and bigots? Or are we still affected by these graphic yet real stories of human beings being subjected to such tyrannical orders by the Taliban regime in Afghanistan? Today, as President of Parliamentarians for Global Action, I welcome our esteemed guests and panelists, MPs from Afghanistan, Honorable Mariam Soleiman-Khail and Honorable Nazifa Yusofi Bek, MPs from all parts of the world, Honorable Rosanna Adam from the Maldives, Honorable Ali Asasi from Canada, Honorable Raymond Lawson from Togo, all of whom are PGA members. Member of the European Parliament, Honorable Petras Austrevicius, founder of Afghans in Crisis Network, human rights activist Charlemagne Gomez, member of the lead impact team and human rights activist Ruskar Azami. I apologize for my dog. The EU Special Representative for Human Rights, Mr. Eamon Gilmore, Associate Director of the Women's Rights Division, Human Rights Watch, Heather Barr, Partner at Anathem Global, Sarah Elizabeth Dill, our Secretary General for PGA, David Donat-Cattin, and the entire team at PGA, and not forgetting friends who have joined us today. I look forward for an engaging discussion today, but more importantly, a frank discussion on moving forward. This is the third roundtable discussion that the PGA has organized. While it may seem repetitious to some of us who have been through these discussions before this, but what is evident is there is still much work left to be done. And we see daily reports of impunity. I apologize. I'm sorry. And the rise of this kind of violations in Afghanistan, and if it can happen in Afghanistan, as we have seen as what is happening in Ukraine, it can happen anywhere else in the world. The rise of radicalism, extremism, and terrorism leaves no stone unturned and is a phenomenon, is a trend that can affect any countries. In a country like Malaysia, while we are not at the stage of a country like Afghanistan, whether in Iran, Iraq, or other countries that has been plagued with this sort of extremism, it does not mean that we are immune to such thoughts and ideologies. So I hope that we'll be able to not just be a part of this discussion today, to fill up a quota that we can show that we have come together, but also to bring it back to our individual parliaments, to lobby among our lawmakers, to lobby among our religious leaders, to lobby among civil societies and our executives in the country, so that the voices of the Afghani people will be also heard in our own parliaments. The voices of the Afghani people, the men, women, and children, will also be heard in our countries, even though we are thousands and thousands of miles away. And this is why the PGA has been so insistent on talking about issues of this, particularly on war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the rising trend and phenomena of extremism, radicalism, and religious bigotry. No country on earth is spared from this sort of menace. Therefore, we must always band together. We have lawmakers, we have civil society, we have members of the European Union coming together to tell us that they are with us in solidarity. So it is time for us to tell the people of Afghanistan that we are in solidarity with them. I remember in the wise words of one of our MPs from Canada, Anita, who mentioned that dictators learn from each other, and they learn fast, and they band together very fast. And the only way that we can stop dictators from further continuing the spread of their ideology, their movement of tyranny and authoritarian rule, is when people like us band together, that we have to tell the world and tell these sort of dictators that there is a force that is against that. And if we believe in universal values, and if we believe in democracy, in justice and equality and freedom and human rights, and I think the time is right for us to bring this conversation to a different level, and not just here among us, and a commitment by all of us to talk about it in our individual parliaments, even though we feel that one voice of a lawmaker in a country that is far away from Afghanistan may not make a difference. But I can tell you, and I can vouch for everyone who is here today, that it will bring a difference, that it will bring hope. At the end of the day, it is a message of love, it's a message of hope, it's a message of peace that we are going to bring, that we hope that the people of Afghanistan are inspired and know that they are not alone in this. So I hand over the floor to my comrade, Mr. David, and I thank everyone for your time, and I look forward to hearing from y'all and to be inspired by all of y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasturi. And I think you overcoming your dog recalcitrant attitude inspires us to give our best against all odds. And one of the things that PGA did under your leadership, and the leadership also of our former president, Margareta Sederfeld, was on the 15th of August 2021 to immediately recognize an unconstitutional change of government in Afghanistan, and therefore send a message to our members that they were, for us, as if they were still sitting parliamentarians. So on addressing the first panel on humanitarian situation in Afghanistan and addressing the needs and ensuring global support for women, as well as men, children, and their human rights, I have the honor to give the floor to Honorable Mariam Solaiman Kail, who is a member of Parliament of Afghanistan, elected, lawfully and legitimately elected, not like those in power today who won the power through the use and abuse of violence. Honorable Mariam.
Thank you, David, for having me again, giving me the honor to speak. And thank you to everyone on the panel, and thank you to PGA for still allowing us to raise our voices during this very difficult time that I don't think any of us were prepared to be in. First and foremost, it's been about 10 months since I've left the country. And in the beginning, we saw the Taliban try to put on their best face because the world decided to give a terrorist organization the chance to rebrand itself, a chance to say that we're a Taliban 2.0, we've changed. We saw women who are Afghan Americans lobbying for the Taliban, saying that they've changed, they've become better people, when we knew that they hadn't. Imagine if the KKK or the Nazis were allowed a chance to rebrand themselves. Would that ever happen? Could you even imagine that happening? That happened in my country. And the excuse they give was corruption. Okay, let's say 10,000 people were corrupt. Have you seen one person in ICC yet? Has anyone been held accountable for their corruption? No. And is the alternative to corruption the Taliban? A group of people who invented child suicide bombers, a group of people who oppressed women in the 90s, who didn't allow women after 6th grade to go to school. And again, they're doing the same thing. Today, I got word that one of my very close friends who was a special forces soldier, it's been 2 weeks he's been in prison in Shashtarak by the intelligence agencies in the Taliban. Why? Because he stood for democracy, because he stood for children's rights, because he stood for women's rights. That's why he's in a jail cell right now, that filled with special forces army soldiers. And this isn't the first time I'm getting these phone calls. It's constant. There's a lot I can talk about. I spent the last month with Crystal Bayat in Utah, a civil activist from Afghanistan, but one of the first protesters who wrapped the Afghan flag around her on Afghan Independence Day when Taliban took over, and the Taliban put a gun to her head. Now she's in Utah. It's very safe. When you hear her stories, the women's stories, we're still connected on the ground. When you hear the soldier stories, your heart breaks because it feels like you're screaming into the void. When I first left Afghanistan, I went to the UN and I spoke, and I begged and I pleaded for one thing to happen, and that was a monitoring mechanism on the amnesty cards. If the Taliban are going to be giving amnesty cards, why are they not allowed to record them somewhere? Why isn't anyone monitoring this? And if something is to happen to them, someone should be able to report that my family member is missing. There's no word on what's happening right now on the ground. The only people who right now on the ground have any access is Afghan Peace Watch, APW, an organization that is on the ground reporting what's happening and what the real numbers are. While the Taliban are saying that violence has gone down to almost nothing, they've reported since January 4,000 incidents, more than 4,000 incidents. So that being all put aside, why I'm here today, why I'm raising my voice still, even though it feels like I'm screaming into the void, it's because this isn't just going to affect Afghanistan. This is going to spread like a wildfire if we don't stop it. The Taliban are gloating that they beat the United States, and not only the United States, but over 50 NATO countries as well. What is this doing? This is motivating every extremist right-wing Islamic group around the globe. And the first place you're going to see the implications is in the Islamic world. These political opportunists will take this win for the Taliban, where I don't personally believe that the Taliban beat anyone. They were handed Afghanistan on a silver platter with a deal that was done by foreign men in a foreign land, where no true Afghan was allowed to sit there and negotiate. First and foremost, this will spread into the Islamic world. The Islamic world will see radicalization. They'll see right-wing fanatics trying to take power in those areas. And all of those rights that women have gotten throughout the years, like in Saudi, the women who are able to drive now. There are men still in Saudi who will try to take opportunities and try to stop that from happening. The women members of parliament that I personally know who won't answer my phone calls right now in the Middle East because they're scared. And I know they're scared because if they make too much noise, God knows what if their rights are taken away. Their rights will be taken away. And then what I fear most is another 9/11 happening, another terrorist attack happening anywhere in the world. And it's inevitable. And we're trying to stop that. So when we're raising our voices and we're asking to band together, it's not just for Afghanistan. It's not just for the women and children of Afghanistan, but it's for the entire world. So again, I plead to please let us raise our voices. Please let the people of Afghanistan raise their voices. And they can't right now. The best thing that they have are people like myself, like Heather Barr, who I know for a fact knows a lot of people there, Nazifa Beg, who has a large connection in Afghan, Ruskar Azami, who has her family and a large connection in Afghanistan. Our people can't speak. It's like asking an abused woman who knows that no one will help her in front of her husband who abuses her. Oh, is your husband treating you well? Of course she's going to lie to you. Of course she's going to say that there's nothing happening because she knows no one can help her situation. Afghanistan is in the same situation. So us who have the privilege and who have this unbelievable privilege to be able to raise our voices and to voice what's happening in our country, please listen to us. Please give us a platform. please stand up for Afghanistan and do not recognize the Taliban. We do need support on the ground. We need NGOs that have grassroots connections on the ground to help the people who actually need help. As of right now, from what I know, even a lot of the money that's going through Afghanistan, it needs monitoring because the Taliban are only allowing their family members, their followers to get help. We need the people who are in Panjshir. We need the people of Hazarajat. We need the people of Kandahar, the Achakzai tribe, the Helmand, everywhere. We need people who have grassroots connections to the people, NGOs that can get help to everyone. Again, thank you for letting me speak again. It's an honor. And David, I can't thank you enough.
The thank you goes to you and the work that you continue to do in a very, very difficult situation. And let me stress how important it is for us, the fight against impunity for the gross human rights abuses that the Taliban have been carrying out. You mentioned the role of the ICC, and certainly this is something that we will continue to raise in The Hague and elsewhere, that it's really a shame that since President Karzai ratified the Rome Statute in 2003, not a single arrest warrant has been issued for gross human rights abuses, crimes against humanity committed, I might say, not only by the Taliban, but also, for example, by certain members of the Northern Alliance, who then maybe were part of those 10,000 corrupted people that you mentioned. And of course, crimes against humanity is much worse than corruption. And I totally agree with you that these rhetorics around corruption has really obscured the vision from the biggest picture, which is the fundamental human rights of women, children, and also men. Today, we are joined by a very important person in this field, maybe one of the most important 5 persons for human rights in the world. So it's an enormous privilege for PGA to welcome a former member of parliament, a former Irish foreign minister, and above all, the Special Representative for Human Rights of the European Union, Mr. Eamon Gilmore, was really given to the EU a level of visibility in the fields of human rights that was unknown before. So, Mr. Gilmore, please accept from us our greatest gratitude for your presence, and we give you the floor from your place in Brussels today. Thank you, Honourable.
Thank you very much, David. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and I want to thank Parliamentarians for Global Action for organising this timely roundtable. As a former member of Parliament for almost 30 years, it's a particular privilege to join with the President of the PGA and also with the members of Parliament from Afghanistan and I'm sure members of Parliament from elsewhere around the world. For the European Union, Afghanistan continues to be a priority, notwithstanding the emergence of other crisis situations, such as war in Europe, prompted by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I want at the very outset to say that the European Union has not and will not abandon the people of Afghanistan. The humanitarian and human rights situation in Afghanistan is, of course, a major concern. The harsh policies of the Taliban has hit hard on all democratic forces in the country. The European Union is deeply concerned about the documented regression of human, civil and political, economic and cultural rights, with violations of freedom of opinion and expression and the right to peaceful assembly. Journalists, human rights defenders, LGBTI persons, minorities, and women and girls activists and individuals associated with the former government are at particular risk. The shrinking space for women's rights, including the latest decisions by the Taliban on the restrictions on clothing and mobility, isolating women even further to their homes, unable to participate on equal terms with men in Afghan society, and increasing the risk of domestic violence and psychosocial trauma are of great concern. The decision by the Taliban to deny second-level education for Afghan girls was condemned by the EU and its member states, together with international partners. It is a blatant violation of the fundamental right to education for all children, which is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and several international human rights instruments, of which Afghanistan is a state party, and no religious or social reason could ever justify such unequal treatment. It is also a reversal of the Taliban's public commitment to the Afghan people and it backtracks on their assurances given to the partners of Afghanistan who worked hard to provide the necessary conditions so that all Afghans would be able to return to school at all levels for the new school year. Religious and ethnic minorities are also experiencing exclusion and increasingly targeted violence, and reports of discrimination and forced displacement have been received. The recent shocking attacks in Afghanistan, including on passenger vehicles in Mazar-e-Sharif and the mosque in Kabul, which have claimed the lives of numerous civilians, among them members of the Hazara Shia community and at least 16 children. The heinous attacks in April against educational facilities, mosques, attended by religious minorities, illustrate that the menace of terrorism is still very much present in Afghanistan. And human rights, of course, are indivisible from the basic human need of living in peace and security. And those responsible for these heinous attacks must be brought to account in a judiciary system that abides by the principles of the rule of law and international standards. And in addition, it is imperative to implement effective counter-terrorism policies to ensure that the threat of terrorism will be forever eradicated inside and from within the territory of Afghanistan. From the early onset, the European Union and its member states have clearly stated that cooperation with any future Afghan government will be conditioned, among other things, on a peaceful and inclusive settlement and respect for the fundamental rights of all Afghans, including women, youth, and persons belonging to minorities. The European Union's response is substantial. The 2022 funding will ensure critical relief assistance to the most vulnerable, including the victims of war, forced displacement, and natural hazards. Interventions focus on providing emergency healthcare, shelter, food assistance, access to clean water and sanitation facilities, as well as various protection services targeting women and children. Let me give you a few examples. EU humanitarian assistance has been increased fivefold in 2021, and the EU will continue to provide high levels of funding in 2022 to ensure critical relief assistance to the most vulnerable. At the pledging conference convened by the UN Secretary-General Guterres in March, the EU pledged 113 million euros. The joint pledges by the EU and its member states on that occasion reached 25% of the overall pledges. The European Union has reinforced support programs for human rights defenders, creating a specific Afghan window and a program for support and advocacy in favor of Afghan civil society organizations. Besides, the EU is helping some Afghan human rights defenders to ensure safe passage and evacuation from the country. We have also committed to continue support to freedom of expression, including the media. As we have said on many occasions, the EU does not recognize the Taliban, but it has decided to continue to engage the Taliban de facto authorities. The EU Special Envoy for Afghanistan, Thomas Nicholson, has met with the Taliban de facto authorities in Oslo, Doha, as well as in Kabul. And in his engagements, he continues to push for the benchmarks established by the EU, specifically human rights, safe passage, full access for humanitarian assistance, inclusive governments, and guarantees on terrorism. Human rights, especially concern women, girls, and ethnic groups and minorities, remain prominent in all his engagements. His visits to Kabul in March and May was used as a push for the return of girls and boys to school at all levels and to address the increased fear created by the Taliban through intimidations, continuous detentions, and arbitrary abductions, as well as to raise the need for dialogue and processes through more inclusive governments. He also does outreach to countries in the neighborhood and engages with the region and in prioritizing meeting the full range of Afghan society, such as Afghan women, civil society organizations, journalists, activists, etc. Together with the EU Ambassador for Gender and Diversity, we've facilitated the Afghan Women Leaders Forum. It has held 2 main gatherings and a number of ad hoc virtual consultations. The latest meeting was 2 weeks ago and gathered almost 60 Afghan women leaders. We've also kept in regular contact with the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission Chair, Shahrazad Akbar, and I want to say that I'm alarmed by the reported decision of the Taliban to dissolve the commission. It is, however, important to continue building a larger consensus at international level around the protection and promotion of human rights in Afghanistan. A key challenge is reliable monitoring of the human rights situation, and particularly of women's and girls' rights, also in the provinces. And this is a specific task for UNAMA and the UN Special Rapporteur. I welcome the strong human rights monitoring element for UNAMA's renewed mandate adopted by the Security Council in March. It is important to mutually reinforce respective efforts, and I have met recently with the UN Special Rapporteur, Richard Bennett. He has now just finished a visit to Afghanistan, and he issued a statement on Thursday of last week where he stated that Afghanistan faces serious human rights challenges and urged the de facto authorities to take the path that brings stability and freedom to all Afghans, especially women. The EU does not accept the violent overthrow of a constitutionally based government in Afghanistan by the Taliban. However, the Taliban, by assuming power, has a responsibility to provide for the safety and security of all Afghan citizens and to respect and protect their human rights and fundamental freedoms. And the EU will continue to hold the Taliban de facto authorities accountable for their commitments and also for Afghanistan's obligations under international law. Thank you for the opportunity of contributing to this important roundtable, and I wish the discussions every success.
Thank you very much, Honorable Gilmore. You really gave us a very comprehensive spectrum of international community engagement with the de facto authorities of Afghanistan. Of course, we know it in international law, right? Whether we like it or not, it is the effective control of territory by a government that characterizes that the authority that one must engage with. And I think what you are doing is really characterized by this sense of urgency that human rights defenders and other people at risk must be helped also through that engagement. So we are very grateful for that. On the civil society side, we are now very pleased to give the floor to a colleague, Heather Barr, who is the Deputy Director at the Human Rights Watch Women's Rights Division. Heather.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And thank you for holding this session. It's really exciting to see parliamentarians from around the world showing up to be in solidarity with Afghanistan and particularly with Afghan women. I really appreciate also the statements by other speakers about the implications that the situation in Afghanistan has for the rest of the world, because we think that that's a very serious issue that everyone should be thinking hard about. Human Rights Watch works on about 100 countries around the world. And in our view, this is easily the most serious women's rights crisis in the world right now. And it's the most serious women's rights crisis in the world since 1996, when the Taliban took over the last time. So there's a huge need for the world to respond to this crisis and to do so in an urgent and coordinated way. And I don't feel like we've quite seen that so far. I really appreciate all of the statements that different countries and organizations have made. I think it's been sort of very striking, the level of unanimity, particularly around the issue of girls' education. I think it's quite difficult to think of a moment when the EU and the OIC, for example, have come out with very, very similar statements almost at the same time on the same issue. So that's really powerful and important. But what we haven't quite managed to do yet and need to do is turn that into real coordinated, concerted action. And I think you referred to that too, Mr. Gilmore. What that action needs to look like is real solid consensus on the fact that the Taliban cannot be perceived as a legitimate government as long as they're engaging in these kind of wholesale human rights abuses, particularly against women and girls. And you know, there are different ways to communicate that. I mean, you know, we've issued some guidance about, you know, our thoughts on the reinstating the travel ban, trying to avoid meetings with the Taliban, not saying that people shouldn't engage with the Taliban, but they should avoid engaging in ways that seem legitimizing, because the Taliban are trying very hard to use every meeting to make themselves look like a legitimate government, even though they aren't. And I think that part of what we need also is is some stronger leadership in trying to bring this coordination and this joint effort together. I'll just speak frankly and say that I think everyone struggled a little bit because the United States played such a dominant role for so long in sort of driving the direction of the international community in Afghanistan. They had the most troops, they spent the most money, and they told everyone else what to do, frankly. And then on the 1st of September, they seem to have lost interest entirely in playing that role. And so it's left a bit of a space. And so we've been trying to talk to different countries about who could step forward or what group of countries could step forward and try to fill that space and provide that leadership. One of the groups of countries we've been talking to are the countries that have committed to having a feminist foreign policy, because we think that this is the moment when your feminist foreign policy is really tested, is when we see what response there is to this kind of a women's rights crisis. The countries that have committed to having a feminist foreign policy are, of course, Canada, France, Germany, Mexico, Norway, and Sweden. So one of the questions that always comes up, of course, when you try and talk about that is, well, what leverage is there anyway? What can we actually do? And to the point I'd want to make on that is that there are things that the Taliban want from the international community. They want recognition, they want legitimacy. As one senior diplomat said to me, they want to be congratulated. I don't think they're ever going to get congratulated, but there are certainly steps toward legitimacy that they need to understand are entirely contingent on them improving their human rights record. Just to talk quickly about a few other things that I think should be priorities for the international community as they think about their engagement on Afghanistan. Thank you for talking about UNAMA and the Special Rapporteur, Mr. Gilmore. We need really, the mandate that UNAMA received on March 17th was a really sort of unexpectedly powerful mandate. We need them to fully use that mandate. We need them to be doing monitoring on the ground in every province and doing public reporting on what they're finding through that monitoring. And that monitoring needs to include issues that are relevant for women and girls, including access to services. We need donors to be continuing to fund activists in Afghanistan and organizations run by activists, and standing up to speak out urgently when there are things like the attacks that we're seeing on the women's rights protesters. We need the international community to unlock the Afghan economy. We can't be punishing all Afghans for the abuses of the Taliban. And so things like letting the central bank function and finding a way for it to do so with appropriate oversight are really urgent and important. I'm glad people have mentioned the ICC. We need to push the ICC to move forward and to move forward with an investigation that includes a specific focus on gender persecution. This is the moment to use that section of the Rome Statute, which has been underutilized so far. And then the last thing I want to say is that there's still so much to do in terms of evacuations. Under the 1951 Refugee Convention, people who don't feel that they can live safely in their country have a right to seek asylum, and that right is not being respected by countries around the world with regard to Afghanistan right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Heather, and your comments, of course, really mirrored those of Mr. Gilmore. So I think we had really a great overview of what can be done, what should be avoided, and a number of very important points for our debate. The final panelist in this first section of our meeting is also another member of parliament from Afghanistan, Honorable Nazifa Yousufi Bek, who is also the founder of the Afghan Women's Parliament in Exile. Honorable Bek, I give you the floor.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me at this roundtable. Let me take opportunity to thank you for considering this important roundtable, this crucial phase of Afghanistan, humanitarian crisis. Unfortunately, this crisis separation all the rights and the capacities, human rights, like my colleagues, Mariam Sulaiman Khel and the other said about the problems. I want to share two suggestions based on the ways how can we help the people of Afghanistan. Important is two parts. one is the humanitarian part, the other is how we should help the social activists in Afghanistan. Humanitarian part, the fact is that we learned very little from the dire situation of the people in Afghanistan. The situation in the city is far from deplorable. This situation is especially tragic in the village, emphasizing the importance of supporting humanitarian aid in Afghanistan and preventing an imminent crisis in the near future. I would like to remind you of two major challenges in the past and now, so that human support for these channels not benefit the people of Afghanistan. These two channels are the government without the Taliban. We have many ideas about this administration and the corrupt non-governmental organizations in Afghanistan. Both institutions have not benefited the people of Afghanistan. You know about the now Taliban. They seen money help the countries, but they use it their side, not they use it the people of Afghanistan. They are not helping the people of Afghanistan. Support to their advance in the past report over the past 20 years of the lack of humanitarian support through NGOs and the Taliban's recent use of aid have been both a threat and barrier to access to aid. My suggestion is the third way and convenient, logical, and safe. It is the channeling of humanitarian aid through Village Council. On the one hand, the Village Council has an existing institution from the city to the village and has a ready mechanism. We can help this good mechanism to the people of Afghanistan. It can deliver aid to the people. Secondly, the Village Council consists of God, fearing and honest people, such as the mosque clergy, the school principal, the local elder, and the people. This group can be effective in distributing aid. The equitable distribution of aid to the people across the country in different areas and to different ethnic groups is a concern in Afghanistan. Therefore, the Village Council represents each village and its heads in the country, and each village has its own representative. Thus, justice is still evident distribution of aid like this. Another issue is this regardless indicator of people needs in different regions of the country. People sometimes have different basic needs in different areas, which can identify through them, and help can be provided because Afghanistan is mountain on one side and agriculture and desert on the other. Therefore, the basic needs differ to each region. The other part, I can suggest you the right activist rights in terms of supporting civil and legal activists in Afghanistan. The situation is even worse than it seems to us. I hear daily through my colleagues and my husband what condition people face now in Afghanistan. In terms my suggestion is that the united voice of support for the activists not to be pressure on the one hand, and on the other hand, the crisis mechanism for their withdrawal from Afghanistan to Pakistan and to Iran in the first place, and then their support for a safe land is a great help to them. And also, I'm the first time when we leave the country with my colleagues, now we are staying in Greece, a lot of time I raise my voice, and we together, we want to, like Mariam Saleh, like other MPs, we want to help the people because we are responsible. Now we create a network and a parliament, like parliament, the member of this group, ethnics like Pashtun, Uzbek, Tajik, Hazara, member of parliament, and judges, journalists, civil activists, we are together, we want to help the people of Afghanistan. About about the past, now many help go to the Afghanistan, but people not receiving this help. About this, I suggest two parts. One is the Village Council, the other is we can help the activists from they will go to the Pakistan and then Iran. We can make a safe place for them. Thank you so much. This is my suggestion because everyone is speaking about the problems. I want to share the two parts we can help the people of Afghanistan. But sorry, my English is not good, but I will try to best for the English. I can be, yeah.
Thank you very much, Honorable. And yes, if you can share with us your written statement, we'll make sure that it's also available online, because I think your intervention gave us a lot of guidance on what I would maybe try to define as a decentralized cooperation, decentralized, not going through the central government, but going to a number of local and sectoral communities, professional associations, the farmers, the ethnic groups, or the local councils, or whichever can express the authority of a given territory, so that it doesn't go through the
Taliban. And also I think it's a good, best way for help the people of Afghanistan. If we choose this way, it is very good, very important. And also, can I share, because we communicate with many NGOs. Now in Afghanistan, they are helping the people, but I think the Taliban is pressure very much. If we choose this way, it's very better because we can help the Pashtun, Uzbek, Dutch, Azora, Helmand, Kandor, everywhere. For which we can help the people of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you. And you also have a written thank you from our president, also our former president, Margareta Sederfeld, who is currently the president of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, joined us. And let me also stress that PGA stands ready to support in whichever way you deem suitable the parliament in exile. And I think, Honorable Mariam, it's very important if you can push also the existence of a government in exile, because even though international law deals with the de facto Taliban authority, under international law, we have seen it in the history of the liberation movement against, for example, the apartheid regime, the government in exile can have a very, very important role to play at the United Nations and in global affairs. So having a government in exile that can be some sort of an alternative to the de facto one can bring about some level of change in the years to come. So we really welcome this decision that you have taken for a parliament in exile, and count on us. Whatever we can do to support your government in exile, we will do so. And I think the parliament can also elect or nominate some sort of symbolic head of a government in exile. Before
David, can I say one thing before?
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to what Nazifa Jan, she just reminded me of something. I just want to remind everyone that for the last 20 years, Afghan soldiers and Afghan people have been fighting side by side with the NATO forces, with the US, with democracy, with standing for human rights. And the people who are in these camps right now, like Nazifa Jan in Greece, these are all people who believe in democracy, and they've been fighting on the front line against terrorism. And we all stand with the Ukrainian people. But as I know from Germany and as well as United States, every one of our refugees who are in camps are being put on the back burner for Ukrainian refugees who are being sent completely straight into the system, which I understand that there should be a sort of vetting that should happen, but forgetting the people who stood with you side by side next to you is heartbreaking. And it makes you wonder, is it because we're poor? Is it because of the color of our skin? Why are Ukrainians given rights before we are? So people like Nazifa Jan, she can't, Nazifa, our member of parliament over here, her and many of our brothers and sisters, they're locked up and they can't raise their voices because they're in refugee camps since last August. So please raise your voices, please gather together to please find a place for these are not refugees who decided to leave their homes. These are political refugees who were forced to leave, who never dreamed that they were leaving their home. So please help, be patient and supportive and help our Afghan refugees as much as possible. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you so much. For 9 months, we are waiting in Greece for because I don't want to share about our stories because I want to help more the people of Afghanistan. You know, I'm seeing every day Taliban killing the people now, cutting the hands. Very bad news, killing and cutting hands and heads. I am seeing the pictures. It's very difficult for us, for my family, because we are spared. My family is now, my colleagues, the MPs now living in Greece for 9 months. They are pressuring me every day, every time. Why not if our family is not, many families in Pakistan, many families now living in Greece, the other is in Pakistan, in India. They are very difficult. They are facing very many difficult problems. But I'm trying to base for the country, for the people of Afghanistan. Now, you know, we are now generation, like I'm 55 years old. Mariam is also very young. Our hope is the help to the people and do some things for them. Now we cannot do something for the people. It's very sad. We are a lot of time stressed. Why we cannot help the people? Why we hear the voice of the people of Afghanistan, but we cannot do something for them? It is very bad news. We want to help, and we need because when we strong, you are support us. You not support us, we cannot be strong and cannot help the people. It is very good. When I know about this roundtable and many countries, MPs, this is the part of this global issues, the parliament. It is very best, and we can together help the people of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. And of course, that's really the topic for our next panel, situation of Afghan refugees around the world, guaranteeing the rights of Afghans to seek asylum. But before that, maybe our EU special representatives will need to leave us. I don't know if Honorable Gilmore wants to comment on this dialogue among and with Afghani parliamentarians, and then we move forward to the topic that, of course, Honorable Mariam highlighted as so important.
Thank you, David. And just a couple of brief points. First of all, to agree with Heather that what we are seeing in Afghanistan is the worst crisis for women and girls that we have seen in our lifetime. And it has to be addressed with the urgency that requires. Secondly, I want to say that, repeat something I said recently in the European Parliament, that while it is understandable that here in Europe, we are focused on the war of aggression by Russia in Ukraine and its consequences, we must not forget the avalanche of crises that we have seen around the world over the last 2 years in particular. And at the top of that list, clearly, is Afghanistan. And the third point that I would make is to express my own willingness to have my door open and to be willing to work and engage with the parliamentarians that we've heard today from Afghanistan. And if there's a network of parliamentarians, then I'm certainly very willing to work with such a network and would listen very carefully to the advice that we would get from such a network, because of course we're talking to the democratically elected voices of the people who are still the democratically elected voices of the people of Afghanistan. So thank you very much, David, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmore, and we will certainly come back to your office, and we know that we always have a door open on behalf of PGA to your office, and we are very, very grateful for the level of transparency and accountability which you put up the Office of the Special Representative now at the EU on human rights. I would suggest that we move forward to the next panel, but then also with Heather and our parliamentarians from Afghanistan, we can, of course, reopen the debate. So on the topic of the human rights of refugees, we have put together 3 speakers that are really championing this subject matter. We will start with Miss Sarah Elizabeth Dill, who is partner at the Anithum Global. And if I'm not mistaken, Sarah, you have been also a leader for many, many years as a lawyer with the ABA and in your legal profession. So it's really a pleasure to host you for the first time. Sarah?
Thank you so much, David, and thankful to all of you who are here today. It's so vital that we have this conversation. And as many of you have noted, as the world's attention and resources have been disparately focused on Ukraine, Afghanistan remains in crisis, and a dire crisis. And it's something that in my work with the IBA War Crimes Committee, I continue to constantly push for. Every time they bring up Ukraine, I said, we have to talk about Afghanistan. We have to focus about Afghanistan. And the Honorable Miriam just did an excellent job highlighting the very problem that I'm about to discuss. So I'm going to start my intervention with some of the existing problems and challenges that we're facing. But then, as the Honorable Nazifa said, I will close with a list of solutions and recommendations and things that I think governments and civil society should do to help move Afghanistan forward. And I think the most important thing as we look at this is that we've seen in recent months everything that Afghanistan needs and wants is possible. We just need the world to commit to it and make it a priority and a focus and allocate the resources to do so. So at this point, as you all know, we still have tens of thousands of Afghans stranded, either in Afghanistan or in deplorable conditions in transit countries. The forced displacement for years has been one of the largest populations in the world and continues to grow. This alone is a basis for an ICC investigation and prosecution and cannot be ignored. It was the basis for jurisdiction in the situation involving the Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar. And in addition to all of the other atrocities, this alone should be something that should be focused on. From day one, as we watched Kabul fall, I pushed my international colleagues that we should investigate, interview, and help move the ICC and other investigations forward. But sadly, this fell on deaf ears. Unlike what we've seen in Ukraine, where we have teams on the ground immediately, both in the neighboring countries, to document atrocities, interview victims, and engage in this, we did not do this with Afghanistan, and this was just an utter and tragic failure. Not only because it hampers and slows down the investigation, but this gives the Afghans an opportunity to be heard, to share the atrocities to occurred and continue to occur. And so we need to rectify this and push forward, helping Afghans seek justice, peace, and accountability, and building a path forward for Afghanistan. Because without justice, peace, and reconciliation, the future will continue to be plagued by conflict, by distrust, and by further tragedy. And so by working with these populations as we are processing them for immigration benefits and resettlement, it's important that we push the investigative teams to get involved and to bring people in to do these important interviews. Also because, as I'll discuss further, we need to ensure that we're not re-traumatizing these victims and survivors with constant interviews again and again and again as to what happened to them. And so we need to learn from the mistakes we committed with Myanmar and ensure that we do the things right with Afghanistan. Another issue that we're facing is family reunification. One family I've worked with, parents, 2 adult daughters in their mid-20s, they are presently in 3 different countries, unable to see each other, unable to visit with one another. And even though they all expressed that one had already settled in one country and asked that they be taken there, they're now in 3 countries. And this also poses a resource issue that countries should consider, because instead of having a family that could live together under one roof together, supporting each other, providing moral support, they are stuck under 3 different properties, which also reduces the availability of housing for others. And so as we go about this resettlement process, countries should consider family reunification and make it possible, especially when you're moving someone from the EU to the UK or similar geographically close regions. There should be cooperation between these countries to ensure that we're bringing families together. And whilst I understand that the most important thing is that we get people out of the camps, out of Afghanistan, we need to make sure that where we are taking them is a priority for their needs, for their families, and for their other benefits that are available. A very tragic thing that we're presently seeing are the ongoing reports of abuse, harassment, and mistreatment of women in many of the shelters or hotels or other properties that are being used. This has to be a priority as countries look at resettlement and welcoming refugees. Protections need to be in place. What is happening in Afghanistan and the treatment of women under the Taliban is atrocious. We cannot do the same thing in the countries that these women and children are arriving in. And so resources, priorities, investigations have to be made into the conditions that Afghans are being held in.
We're also, again, extremely slow processing times. Some applications from fall of 2021 are still pending, people being stuck in camps all over the world. And again, as we've seen, Ukrainians are being expedited. I was in a way heartbroken when I learned of Ukrainians who had fled, who were given tourist visas to come to the United States, whilst Afghans who helped the US military are still stuck in camps awaiting the processing of humanitarian parole. It is a discriminatory and disparate treatment, and we need to really push governments to stop that. Even more frightening are the ones left behind in Afghanistan, unable to get out, unable to even get humanitarian parole or another visa to get to a safe country, or even the lack of means of evacuation. And as others noted, yes, there are vetting concerns that are in place, but we have seen a much higher standard than is necessary being imposed on Afghanistan, whereas those coming from Ukraine are subjected to a much lower standard of interviewing. Finally, we have a major legal crisis, which, given the amount of legal volunteers around the world who've offered to step up for help, we're continuing to see a lack of available access. We're also seeing applications getting rejected that were submitted by individuals working on their own for minor technical problems. And it's quite unfortunate that this is occurring, because all that does is slows down the process. And so someone who submitted an application in September of 2021, has it rejected in December, turns around, finds someone to assist them in January or February, they have now lost 6 or 7 months in that time period. And now we have the additional backlog of what's happening with Ukraine. We're also getting reports of Afghans being placed on lengthy waiting lists for pro bono legal services, attorneys charging tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees for very simple parole or other applications. But also, we do have a population that requires more advanced and technical legal support in the immigration courts or the asylum process, and they're unable to find groups. I even saw an email the other day that there was one organization who is so overwhelmed that they cannot take on any new cases. And so we really need to push governments to provide funding for legal services for Afghans. We have over 40,000 Afghans stranded overseas, awaiting humanitarian parole, awaiting processing, and awaiting the ability to resettle in a new country where they will be safe. In the United States alone, we've seen that under their new plan called Uniting for Ukraine, they're allowing for expedited processing. They've waived the requirement for in-person consular interviews, something that Afghans have been subjected to. Which also poses a significant problem, given that the US presently does not have an embassy in Afghanistan to engage in these interviews. And so that leaves the Afghans within Afghanistan without recourse and without remedy at this point. There's issues as disparities in fees that are being charged and fee waivers. It was fortunate that the US was able to allow for TPS, but when you look at the regime that the EU implemented for Ukrainians very, very quickly, the question remains, why has that not been implemented for Afghans? And finally, we have the issues that we have a continuing crisis in Afghanistan. You have the Taliban daily engaging in atrocities and restriction of rights. And that is something that the world must address, especially as we look at how we are going to help save these people. So briefly, as to the solutions that I will put forward today, first and foremost, all solutions must be led by Afghan voices, and the world must prioritize what Afghans want and need, because they do know best. And so that needs to be the absolute and utter priority as we move forward. Government resources need to be devoted to expedited processing of applications, as well as continued evacuations or safe routes for those seeking to flee. We have to provide legal assistance as well as resettlement assistance, but we need to ensure safe resettlement, especially concerning issues of women and girls. Job training and placement, resources to rebuild lives, job fairs, working with companies to bring the Afghans in, and educating the public that this is a population that is well-educated, professional, talented, expertise, and that we can have jobs for them in the countries they're in, but also educational resources, ensuring Afghans have access to continue at universities or other higher education so that they can continue to play a valuable role in civil society, but also allow them that when they do return, to help rebuild their country back to what it was and even better. Additionally, we do need to have paths for more permanent relief. There's presently a proposal in the US to allow for permanent residency that will give Afghans some stability until the day comes that they can safely return to their country. We also, as others noted, we need to engage within Afghanistan. We need to have means to be on the ground there, to have some relief from the sanctions so that we can get in and help the people and help the crisis so that those who aren't able to flee can at least live safely, and we can start to put pressure and mitigate the damage that is presently being done. Also, as I mentioned, continuing the investigations into war crimes and crimes against humanitarian, working with victims, working with survivors and those fleeing, and developing means from the outside as to how we can push for accountability, for justice, for rebuilding and reconciliation. And it's not just the ICC. And I think this is something where we should also work to educate the populations as to, the ICC is a long process. Investigations take a long time before you will even see an arrest warrant or someone brought before the court, but it's not the only option. We have universal jurisdiction. We can pursue prosecutions in other countries. We can pursue domestic prosecutions eventually and other accountability mechanisms, but we also should push for the international community to also put pressure on the ICC as they have done with Ukraine. And the final aspect, and this is one that's just so important to me, is that we really need to allocate mental health resources. We have a population that has endured war for decades. They've forced to flee their homeland. They're in deplorable conditions. They're transferred to places that are unfamiliar to them. And we need to ensure that we take care of people from day one to ensure that they thrive, that they heal, that they deal with the trauma they have so that they can rebuild Afghanistan and work for the better of the future of the country. So with that, I'll turn it back over to all of the other incredible colleagues today and look forward to hearing further remarks.
Thank you, Sarah. And really you, with your experience as a lawyer, highlighted that probably the most violated principle of law nowadays is the principle of equality of all before the law, with all these discriminatory applications. And this should be, should lead us to think. And if I can add one point is this, I think that when we devise sanctions, we need to be smart. So if we want these warlords and human rights abusers to be brought to justice, maybe instead of imposing on them travel bans, we should invite them to some nice places where they can suddenly be arrested. So let's be smart and find ways and means. I really welcome your suggestion to use universal jurisdiction much more also on Afghanistan, and PGA supports the bipartisan bill now in the House of Representatives that creates universal jurisdiction in US law for war crimes should be extended to genocide. And we don't see that only applying for Ukraine. It should apply also to those who have been involved in other atrocities. And this brings me to the next speaker, who is a refugee since a few years, our colleague Ruskar Azami, who today speaks on behalf of the Lead Impact organization, which she recently joined. She has been with the American branch of the International Association and also with Parliamentarians for Global Action. Ruskar.
Thank you so much, Professor David, and thank you everyone for coming together, and pleasure meeting so many familiar faces that I follow their work, such as Heather, Sarah, and everyone else. It's a pleasure to be here and speak. I would continue from what Sarah said. I will emphasize on the role of ICC, of course. Afghanistan have an active investigation case where Talibans are the target to be investigated. And one discussion that I had many times in this last couple months with Afghan colleagues on focusing how to document the war crimes and crime against humanity that they are committed by Taliban, because just speaking about them in social media would not get us somewhere. The proper documentation and sending them to the office of ICC for investigation, that would be another step to the right direction, because I truly believe that justice is the only way to set everything right. And I believe that this regime will not last forever and they should be brought to justice. Professor David knows, and we had many times this discussion, that without bringing justice and setting those examples, we will not get anywhere. So that's very important. I will leave it there. And Today I want to focus on the situation of Afghans in Pakistan, because it's very crucial and important, and it's becoming an important hub for Afghans who are trying to seek refuge or resettlement in third country. They are using Pakistan as a temporary place to get there, and from there get their cases processed to other countries. But the problem arises, and I'm very happy that Honorable Ali Ehsasi is here too, because I know he's in the picture and he knows what is the threshold, at least for countries like Canada and other countries, to get Afghan refugees. And the threshold is that at least an Afghan who are going to another country and they don't have any other active case already in the process with a third country, they need to have an asylum certificate from UNHCR, the United Nations Higher Commission for Refugees, to be recognized as a refugee. And then after that, they can apply for resettlement in any other country. So that is the very least threshold for any person who is flooding persecution from Afghanistan to Pakistan. And another important section in this matter is that when you are having an asylum certificate in Pakistan, you're safe from deportation, you're allowed to get education throughout the time that you are resettling or temporarily staying in Pakistan. So that allows you to have the opportunity to work, that allows you to go to school or continue your education, where at this point, many Afghans, I looked at the data that UNHCR itself published, more than 300,000 Afghans fled only since August to Pakistan. And most of them, they are at risk of deportation. And a lot of families, they go through 3 processes of interviews with UNHCR. UNHCR does not offer them resettlement, but the least help that they can do, they can grant them an asylum certificate that proves that they are, they met the criteria and they have that protection. Unfortunately, this is 10 months now that many Afghans, they haven't got that one certificate that can verify that they are having refugee status and they will be eligible to apply for resettlement. Either they settle in Pakistan or apply for resettlement in a third country. And this opens a lot of doors and encourage corruptions in Pakistan itself, because we have seen, and many other NGOs that they are involved in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, they know that they pay a lot of fees for visa extension, for exit permit, for many, many other reasons. And these fees I'm talking is starting from $50 and goes to $400 to $1,000 or more than that. And for families that they left everything behind in Afghanistan and they don't have any jobs and they don't have that opportunity to even work, putting together those kind of money, it's impossible for them. And on top of that, we are talking about the population that they are fleeing persecution. Another section that I have been very, very much frustrated. A lot of Afghans are forced when their visa time is expired. They will be granted 6-month visa or 3-month visa. And once their visa is expired, they need to go to the border, re-enter the country. And we all know how is that situation. There is no guarantee that once you cross that border, even if you have a valid visa, you will get a re-entry in order to be safe in Pakistan. So just for me, especially when I was talking with Federica, and I have been in touch with a lot of NGOs that they are directly working with Afghan refugees in Pakistan, and they are trying to get them to safety. One of the major issue right now is having an asylum certificate, either issued by UNHCR or issued by Pakistan government. In both cases, we don't have any direction. There is no clear response to it. And I am pleading here to parliament members that their countries are member of United Nations to put pressure on United Nations to encourage the UNHCR office to at least print those certificates and give those people safety in Pakistan, so they can have a pathway either settling in Pakistan, or if they want to go to another country, they have that option at least. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruskar. And this is a very concrete action point that you will certainly follow up with. And Certainly also PGA's members in Pakistan had been active under the configuration of the past government. Now there is a new government, so probably there is a space for debate there. The last speaker of this second panel is Ms. Charlemagne Gomez, who is the founder of the Afghans in Crisis Network. And for the first time,
I also want to, sorry about bothering you, but about the Sora and Ruskar speak, I want to agree with them, because many Afghan people now is saying in Pakistan, they finished the whole process, but now rejected by the countries. I don't know what is the problem. It's very bad because they have economic problems, some problems, but they are now received the reject. It is very sad news. For 6-9 months, they are waiting for the visa for going to the other place, but now rejected by the other countries, like the Canada, like the German countries. I want to agree with them also.
Thank you, Honorable. Absolutely. And this was one of the reasons why we organized this meeting, to highlight the importance of this issue. Absolutely. Ms. Gomez, please go ahead.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. And I think this is amazing that all these different ideas are coming together, and it's great that I'm actually going last in this particular section, because you've all highlighted so many things that we're experiencing. I'm just going to give you a brief outline of who we are. Basically, I used to work in Afghanistan, and as Afghanistan fell, I remember reaching out to a few of my friends and colleagues who worked there and said, "Are you okay?" And, you know, lots of people came to me and said, "Oh, you know, we need to get out." So I started as an individual trying to, you know, contact Canada, different places, and we managed to get some people out. And due to, you know, the workload that I got, I approached my university, the Global Campus of Human Rights in Venice, with Manfred Novak, because I needed volunteers. So basically, we established this network called the Afghans in Crisis Network, which we are all activists and alumni from the Global Campus on Human Rights. So we established this network, and we approximately had something like 120 persons on our list. 50, 60 of them have got out. We still have about 30 of them, and Honorable Nasifa and all the other MPs here, and we have still 9 female MPs on our list. Some of them are in Pakistan and some of them are in Afghanistan, and they're in a very disparate situation. And so we've got something like 30 people in Afghanistan, 30 families in Afghanistan, and then we've got something like 25, 30 families in Pakistan. And I cannot reiterate everything that's been said here. I mean, definitely we were lucky, because what we've done, we've used our university to get some scholarships. So basically, some of the scholarships for Global Campus were established in December. Only now are we actually getting these people to the countries. Luckily, the other day, it took us 4 months to get 2 of our people to Finland, and they're just about to get their flights bought. But once again, I want to emphasize the money issue. I mean, this is, you know, people have been in these places, some since September, some since October, and the prices in Pakistan and Iran are just astronomical. I mean, we've been lucky, we've been able to raise some funds, but just to give you an example of one of my colleagues who I actually know personally, we managed to get her a scholarship in Austria. And she arrived in Pakistan on the 10th of February, after many, many glitches. And then she had an interview with the embassy. And unfortunately, she needed more documents, including a letter from the police saying that she did not have a criminal record, which would have meant that she would have had to go back to Afghanistan to get this record. We managed to convince her that didn't need to be done, but she needed to also have a lease in Austria of a house. She has no money. So she's been there for 90 days. We've literally supported her with $10,000, because each day we're being charged $90 for where she's living. And now we've been told that the process is going to take another 2 or 3 months, when we've had that scholarship since February or March. So these are just like everyday problems. And then we also have a very good relationship with a particular European embassy. And definitely in the last 2-3 months since Ukraine, we've definitely seen the fact that many of the people that would have got accepted before, they're not getting accepted anymore. And these are, you know, women who were formerly married to a Taliban, who, you know, had their family arrested, had their, you know, their family threatened, even in some cases their family killed, and yet they've still been denied. And, you know, if you want to look at perhaps solutions, I was, you know, the other day we had this miracle case whereby this woman was able to get all these documents from NGOs stating how much she was at risk. And I wonder if the people, when they're actually presenting their cases to these embassies, and I understand that all these embassies are overwhelmed and, you know, they're giving interviews as much as they can. And, you know, it's normally 1 or 2 people. And the way that they look at the cases, they've only got literally an hour to decide, you know, if that person's got enough evidence. But is there not something that we can do to really outline what is, you know, whether they're really eligible according to their refugee status? And the majority of people on our list have, you know, very, very, very serious issues whereby, you know, someone of their family was killed, or the organization they was working in, you know, the former executive director was killed. So we've got very, not necessarily high profile persons, but definitely high risk persons. And we definitely have, you know, people like MPs who have not even been able to get an interview with an embassy. And then, of course, just to give you an example, with regards to one gentleman who I used to work with many, many years ago, he arrived on the 1st of October to Pakistan. We managed to try and get him an interview. His interview was originally done for 18th of March. This particular embassy said, sorry, we need to reschedule your appointment. And they scheduled it for the 14th of April, which is Easter. So he turned up at the door of this particular embassy and they turned him away. And now they've given him an interview for June. You know, this is a gentleman who had quite a lot of resources. And now since October, he's trying to maintain his family of 6. 10 months later. So it's a lot about money. I mean, we've been obviously, and everyone knows the prices of passports, the prices of visas, and then the very fact that, you know, these visas normally run out after 1 month, 2 months. Just to give you a silly example, one of my persons on the list said, oh, could you please send us $200? And I sent him $200 by Western Union. And they turned him down. Why? Because he didn't have a valid visa. So they're getting in all of these problems every day. It's just, you know, one problem after another, let alone actually an embassy actually opening their doors for an interview for them. I love the idea that you have this parliamentary network, and it's something that we've been trying to look at in the last few weeks, because we see that a lot of these people will not get an interview, and even if they get an interview, they may not be accepted. So we want to give them alternatives. Many, as you say, if they go back to the border, if they go back to Afghanistan, you know, some of them, they will face huge humanitarian crisis. Others will be killed for who they are and the fact that they've gone outside and they're going back. So we need to find some solutions for these people with regards to the money, with regards to getting access to jobs, with regards to also, you know, something that everybody's talking about, and perhaps this is why people are so reluctant, is, you know, just as someone said, the people who we're talking about, they're not the average Joe in the street. They are people who ran governments, who ran NGOs, who were these amazing women rights activists, these human rights activists. So when we talk about, you know, the world stage, the complementary, their experience that could actually contribute to our countries, whether they be in Canada, US, Spain, Germany, they will actually contribute something positively to our countries. But if that's not possible, if we are seeing that the gates are shutting, why don't we also do, you know, like a women's rights kind of project whereby we have these women in Pakistan who are able to actually keep up the momentum and look at strategies. We're also looking at that with election personnel all throughout the world, because we saw, you know, how many billions were spent on the elections in Afghanistan. And of course, we now have the IEC, the ECC completely dissolved. And obviously it had some, you know, chinks in the way that the elections were run. And, you know, we hope that the international community has learned some of their lessons. But if in the glimmer of hope that maybe in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, 7 years' time, you know, we are able to go back to Afghanistan, we are able to actually, you know, do these kind of projects, we don't want to be starting again. We already have that knowledge amongst these women's rights activists, these electoral persons, the people who've been MPs. We have that knowledge there. And if we want to maintain this legacy of, you know, what they Afghans have, brought together in these last 20 years, especially with regards to women's rights, we must not lose it. If we can't get them to other countries, if we can't keep them safe, then we should also be trying to keep that legacy alive by making sure that some kind of project, such as the network, could be extended in order to also make these people, have some kind of livelihood as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shalmani, and you really brought us into a very practical dimension of how the help works, and this was really useful. We are like 14 minutes late, which is not too bad in my standards, but I'm Italian, so nobody's perfect. So we have 4 parliamentary voices. So without further ado, what can parliamentarians do? Let me give the floor to our honorable member from Togo, Honorable Raymond Lawson. Please, Honorable. Unmute, if you can. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry, because I catch a flu 2 days ago, so I am very sorry for that. But I want to thank everybody today. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And what I can say that I sympathize with Afghanistan people who is suffering. And I am very sorry about what happened in Afghanistan right now. But it seems to be that when we are talking, it's like a cry in the desert, but one voice plus another voice can make a big thing and can change things in Afghanistan. So it's very important for everybody around the world to talk about Afghanistan right now. We know that we have many problems in Ukraine, in Africa. So most of the people in Africa are thinking about themselves before thinking about Afghanistan. But in Togo, what I can say that we are lucky that we have women, a lot of women who cares about the other women around the world. So with the Taliban, we see right now that a lot of women and most of the women and most of the children are suffering because of the Taliban. So what can we do right now? Because 9 months ago, Taliban promised that they are going to respect human rights, but until now, it's worse every day. So what can we do as a parliamentarian? What can we do? And as I say, in Togo, we have the chance to have, a woman who is a speaker of the parliament. So she's very touched by this problem. I spoke with her a few days ago, and she was very touched by the situation of the women and the children in parliament. So what we can propose as a parliament is to keep in touch, to stay in touch with the real MPs in Afghanistan, like Honorable Mariam, wherever they are, we have to keep in touch every day with them because they know what is happening in their country, so they can tell us what we can do really, and we can put pressure on this Taliban to change, because in the world right now we see everywhere that the woman can lead, and the woman is necessary to work with every woman in the world. In every country, we see in France that they have a woman first prime minister. So everybody is recognized the leadership or the quality of the work of the women. So what we need to do is to continue to support them every day, because as Honora Mariam said, that's happened right now in Afghanistan, but it can happen everywhere, you know, in Togo or in West Africa. We see this there, a lot of jihadist group. And in Togo, a few days ago, jihadists killed several people. In Burkina Faso or in Mali, it's every day. So we have to be together, to hold everybody hand, to work together against these Taliban. But I think the solution is not to isolate all the Afghan people. We need to ban only the Taliban from the international community. And how can we do that without making people of Afghanistan suffering? Is what we have to think about, because it's good to put sanction against Taliban and Afghanistan, but that have consequences in everyday life for Afghanistan people. We don't want them to suffer more. So it's what the Taliban are playing with this, you know, because they know that the international community won't let Taliban, Afghanistan children and women suffer. So what can we do? What is the real measure we can do? Is we can talk about that with Honorable in Afghanistan, and I think we need to have in our parliament open days about Afghanistan. What happened every day in Afghanistan? We have to show the other parliament all over the world, you know, because sometimes you think that it's a dream or a nightmare, you know. When last time, 2 days ago in French television, they show us a video about parents who are so poor that they are selling their children, you know, in Afghanistan right now. And this expressed every day because people are so poor. So what can we really do? So we need the help of Honorable MP of Afghanistan to do something who can impact the Taliban and let them know that no, what he is doing is not the right thing to do. So we need to push them to change, and the better things that we have to do is to maintain the link between the real parliament, the democratic parliament, and to continue to work with them. Is what I can propose for.
Thank you.
The honorable from Afghanistan, and so
thank you, honorable.
Yes, and we need to vote sanction with the people who work with them, you know, with the other country who work with them, with the Taliban too. It's what I can propose for the Afghanistan people. Oh, yes.
Thank you, honorable, and your leadership in our parliamentary rapid response group is really a testament of your continuity on those issues, and it's so good to see you engaged. This brings me to Honorable Ali Essassi from Canada, hopefully today from his hometown Toronto and not Ottawa, maybe, but maybe I'm wrong. He's really a leader in this field, as being the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on atrocity prevention, and one of the leaders, of course, in the PGA board on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Ali.
Thank you very, very much, David. I'm afraid to report that I am joining all of you from Ottawa, but it is
nobody's perfect.
Absolutely, for sure. But thank you so much for all the speakers we've had so far. I could say, despite the reality that I have been following developments closely on the ground in Afghanistan, there is much to be learned by all the discussions that we've had today. Now, it does not come as a surprise to any of you that it has now been a year since the Taliban have taken over in Afghanistan. And for all of us who are either following developments or engaged with developments on the ground, it has been truly nothing short of heart-wrenching. What we are seeing, obviously, as all of the speakers have rightly pointed out, is that the humanitarian situation is deteriorating drastically in Afghanistan. And we are seeing not what we generally refer to as backsliding in Afghanistan, but something that is truly horrendous and something that we should all be fixated on and help one another to ensure that this issue does make it to the top of the list of things that the international community should be engaged on and should use its good offices to make sure that we can hopefully turn things around. Now, as has been again duly noted by all of the speakers, unfortunately, we are going through very, very difficult times. And the gaze of the international community, despite everything that we have seen in Afghanistan, has not been on the humanitarian suffering and all the terrible violations that are taking place. And this is against a backdrop of numerous developments. Of course, there is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There is also, of course, the food crisis that we are all very well aware of. But also, let us not forget that currently all estimates are that we have over 100 million individuals displaced around the world. And that is truly a staggering number. I do remember 6 or 7 years ago, that number was below 50 million, and it is now above 100 million. So we have to bear that in mind as well. But these multitude of crises obviously should be a wake-up call to us all that we have to do so much more on Afghanistan. Essentially, what each of us are doing is we're all overwhelmed with a number of different things, but we have to make sure that insofar as the to-do lists of our countries are concerned, Afghanistan does make it to the top of the list. Now, what we are also seeing, as some of the speakers have noted, is that we are also seeing disillusionment within Afghanistan itself. If the international community is not paying attention, then all those remarkable individuals on the ground in Afghanistan will obviously lose faith. So we all have to do a better job. Now, apart from that, which is heartbreaking to see the disillusionment, is also, as every organization will tell you, within that vacuum, which is now Afghanistan, we are seeing a number of transnational groups actually operating outside of Afghanistan. So ignoring this problem, ignoring the human rights violations that are going on is not something that can be sustained. It is something that we certainly all have to change. Now, the principal factor, as everyone does know, is that the Islamic Emirates, even when you look at the government authorities in Afghanistan, they are each trying to outdo each other in terms of demonstrating that they have the religious bona fides. And that is why we're seeing such an escalation in human rights violations across that country, as the Taliban obviously attempts to consolidate its hold on Afghanistan and to, of course, suffocate all the voices that are the voices of Afghanistan. Now, as everyone is aware, and it was referenced on several occasions, Canada has committed to ensure that we welcome 40,000 Afghans. But that has not been a challenge that has been easy. To date, the latest estimates suggest that so far, a year in, we have only managed to bring in 17,000 Afghans. So much more work remains to be done. But as you all know, again, panelists did reference this as well, Canada is at the behest of international organizations in neighboring countries, as well as needing to work with authorities in those neighboring countries, whether it is Pakistan, whether it is Iran, or any other country in which there might be Afghan refugees. So as much as we are trying, and our system in itself is overwhelmed, but we are, again, just to highlight this factor, trying to work cooperatively with different countries and organizations, and that has given rise to a number of challenges. But we certainly have a very long way to go, and we will continue to provide financial and humanitarian assistance through multilateral institutions as well. Now, obviously, having listened to everyone, it is incumbent upon a group such as ours, such as the PGA, to make sure that we champion the cause of Afghanistan. We have to, in the absence of foreign journalists and foreigners within Afghanistan, it is incumbent upon each of us to act as eyes and ears, make sure, again, that as a priority for our respective countries, this moves up the list, because this is certainly not a country that can be ignored. We also have to make the most of all the incredible individuals within Afghan diasporas around the world, whether it is the duly elected members that we have heard from today, or others around the world who bring to bear a breadth of experience and knowledge that we should all tap into, or whether it's other experts that are familiar with Afghanistan, have been on the ground in Afghanistan, and can provide us with a lot of guidance. So we all have to work together to amplify the voices of Afghan leaders, both within Afghanistan and outside. Now, I have no doubt that by leveraging all the expertise that we have, and by joining each other to make sure that more resources are allocated to Afghanistan, whether it is in terms of the ICC, or whether it's to organizations on the ground in neighboring countries, I have no doubt that with all of us working together, we can accomplish that. So I will keep my remarks short, but will continue to be available to anyone if there is anything you can think of that I can champion within our parliament and with Canadian officials. Please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. And within the board of PGA, with you and Rosaina, we'll close the meeting. I know that this issue will remain a top priority for us. And now before giving the floor to our last speaker from the Maldives, I have really the honor to bring back the discourse to the European Union. I don't know whether he's connecting with us from Vilnius, Lithuania, or from Brussels or somewhere else in Europe, but we have the honor today of having Honorable Petras Austrevicius, who is the chairman of the European Parliament delegation on Ukraine, and certainly speaking from a country now bordering with Russia, feeling the biggest threat of the ongoing war of aggression. So we really double appreciate your presence today with us.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. And let me to thank PGA for organizing this exchange and assembling people personally engaged. I mean, having motivation to work and having such an excellent overview on the situation and coming up with very practical solutions and suggestions. What is the most important probably element in politics, not just the verbal exchange, but some actions to be followed. So indeed, I mean, everybody knows the dire situation in Afghanistan. And so by this, we have to be ready for our engagement with Afghanistan people in particular, for long periods of time. So I didn't meet anybody around being very optimistic about developments in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, I hear every time even more complicated stories coming out from the country, from domestic developments, as well as quite critical assessments from outside those experts. But so again, not being overcritical, I think we have to be realistic. I mean, things are complicated, and probably they might continue in this way for some time. So let's find best ways how we can manage and navigate in those very stormy waters of Afghanistan and region around, because Afghanistan has a certain impact on the whole region. There are big players in the region with a global stature. There are smaller but regionally important countries. And we have to see a bigger picture, I mean, in this regard. So that's why let's see things as they are. I would probably focus on three major points. First of all, attention and focus. It was mentioned that different and many events have rightly been dominating international agenda. So that is right. I mean, we got from February even Ukraine's situation on the spot, and definitely Europe is very busy. Ukraine, I mean, let's not be envy to that country and people, as more than 10 million of them are IDPs, and more than over 6 million refugees. I mean, to real extent of this definition. But attention should be given equally to Afghanistan. And it would be the biggest political mistake to focus or refocus attention from Afghanistan as we have more things on our agenda. No, Afghanistan must stay on our agenda. And I can tell you that in the European Parliament, we try to do our best, although we never have a shortage of events which we have to discuss during our plenaries and in our committee agendas. But as from recently, I mean, in April, we had a very good discussion with the European Parliament's resolution on the situation in Afghanistan, and in particular, the situation of women's rights, strongly condemning the Taliban's decision to postpone the return of girls above 6 to schools indefinitely. And this focus on Afghanistan is sending a very major message, I mean, to Taliban, which is not recognized as a legal government, as you know, by the European Union, neither the member states of the European Union. But focusing on Afghanistan, we sent a message to Taliban that we follow situation. We know things as they go. I mean, statements and resolutions from our side indicate we are well informed and engaged into the situation in Afghanistan. And besides issues mentioned before by honorable speakers, I mean, took a floor before me, I would mention impunity as a very clear and an important issue to be raised and understood by us so rightly, in order to give, again, those responsible for crimes, discrimination, or particular actions in Afghanistan that they will not escape once the crimes are made. Okay, so again, women's rights, as I mentioned before, and even individual violation of human rights. So that's why information we receive from our partners, from NGOs still active. And I appreciate, the activity of many of those NGOs who are very brave people, definitely. Journalists, especially women journalists, who do their best in Afghanistan, to send information outside, since with no that information, we will be simply blinded by the pictures in Afghanistan. Second issue is partnership. Well, in spite of the fact that we do not and we're not intend to recognize Taliban government, those criteria for conditionality is well known and well presented to Taliban, and well agreed and well followed by the European Union inside. But so we have partners, we have members of Parliament of Afghanistan who are, many of them are in exile. They are organized, in small or bigger groups. So we have our partners whom we can't, abandon and neglect. So that's why even the national parliaments in a democratic world, to my mind, must do their best in order to keep partnership and organize events and show attention to our Afghan colleagues and politicians who have absolutely different and sometimes very difficult times for the time of being resigned in foreign countries. And thirdly, support. I appreciate very practical remarks and good piece of information we received from many, but in particular, Ms. Charlemagne Gomes. She mentioned those Afghan students' visas issue, and we've been involved in this issue as well, writing letters of support, trying practically resolve some unbelievable situations which happen to be because of many circumstances, but probably being engaged and trying to assist individuals in those very difficult situations. We show our passion and our understanding to Afghanistan in the best way. It's easy to make sound statements, but then backtrack and to do nothing. So that's why that practical support, students' visas, individual support for people in some peculiar situations. This is something what we have to continue. So, and of course, the support must be extended to the Afghan society as a whole. So that's why we do support by all means humanitarian support to and assistance to be provided to Afghanistan. So we do our best working through the UN agencies based in Afghanistan. And believe me, there is a strong political agreement in the European Parliament. We have to do our utmost in order to implement this policy line to the end and to provide as much as possible for those people in need. So let me to thank once again. I'll stop at this point, and I'm looking forward for our exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable, and we look forward to continue to work with you and also through our PGA European Parliament group. I now give the floor to the PGA board member from Maldives, Honorable Rosaina Adam, who is also the convener of the PGA Campaign on Democratic Renewal and Human Rights and the chair of our Parliamentary Rapid Response Group. Rosaina.
Can you hear me now? Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be a part of this important discussion. My name is Rosaina Adam, and I'm a member of the Parliament of Maldives. This is my 14th year in Parliament and as an elected MP. I'm the chair of the Standing Committee of the Parliament monitoring the independent institutions of Maldives, such as the Civil Service Commission, Anti-Corruption Commission, etc. I'm also a member of the Human Rights and Gender Committee of the Parliament, and I will take the issues that we are discussing today to the Human Rights and Gender Committee's meeting in our Parliament tomorrow. As David just mentioned, I'm also the chair of the Parliamentary Rapid Response Team. So let me just say a few words on that. PGA's Parliamentary Rapid Response Team responds and intervenes when parliamentarians and human rights defenders are at risk. PART has issued global statements and urgent actions in many countries, including Afghanistan, and has promoted a campaign to stop violence against women in Parliament. As chair of PART, I seize this opportunity to welcome Honorable Mariam Soleiman-Hale, Ms. Margarita Sederfeld, and Honorable Beatrice Epaya as new PART members. This roundtable is the third meeting of the working group on Afghanistan that we held following the withdrawal of the US troops from Afghanistan last August. We had been actively working on preventing and addressing violent extremism even before. In 2017, during PGA's annual forum, members of parliament from over 50 countries around the world committed to take parliamentary action at a national, regional, and international level to prevent violent extremism and mass atrocities worldwide. These commitments included fighting against impunity and bringing to account those most responsible for the commission of heinous crimes. We need to renew these commitments made in Milan. To this end, we're sharing the Milan Action Plan, which you can see in the chat, to inspire further action. Our members in neighboring countries have been providing important help. Since the aftermath caused by the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, our national group in Pakistan, led by Honorable Naveed Qamar, has been providing assistance to asylum seekers and refugees and those trying to cross the border. Today, we heard directly from the civil society, members of the Parliament of Afghanistan in exile, and international organizations about what needs to be done and what we as parliamentarians can do to support Afghans on the ground. Let me stress that the retrogression and continued restrictions of women's and girls' rights over the last months, for instance, ordering mandatory hijabs or banning girls from accessing schools, calls for our urgent action as we see the deteriorating nature of the situation. As always, it's the women and girls who suffer the most in these kind of situations. And we keep hearing horrific stories about the sufferings of girls in Afghanistan, such as girls being sold to rich elderly men in order to feed the rest of the families. All this is so heartbreaking. What has been happening in Afghanistan since the Taliban takeover proves that democracy should never be taken for granted. The testimonies that we have just heard from the panelists portrayed a bleak picture, but they also underline the key role that parliamentarians can play in making a difference, protecting and defending human rights, and finding rule of law solutions to ensure accountability. Therefore, I will make some suggestions that we as direct representatives of the citizens in our country can make. As non-Afghan parliamentarians, we must support our Afghan colleagues in engaging at the local, national, regional, and international levels to achieve multi-partisan agreements to prevent and hold mass atrocities. To ensure accountability for these heinous crimes so that perpetrators are brought to justice in accordance with internationally accepted standards, and ensure that victims have access to proper redress and reparations and provide assistance and refuge to those fleeing the Taliban ruling. To continue fighting impunity, we need to work rapidly and effectively on the adoption of domestic legislation that incorporates the definition of international crimes. We have to ensure support of national, regional, and international mechanisms fighting for global justice, including the International Criminal Court, even though the judicial process has not yet resulted in a satisfactory outcome for the people of Afghanistan. We need to recognize that it is paramount to enable environments for civil society and the existence of free press without any censorship, and ensure the inclusion and rights of individuals and communities, including minorities and vulnerable groups, in order to prevent more mass atrocity crimes. As members of parliament, we need to partner or engage with our colleagues, civil society organizations, community, faith leaders, and other institutions to work on short-term goals that are achievable and effective, such as providing immediate aid to civilians in need and building trust relationships. We need to provide assistance to extend civic participation, raise awareness, and develop joint and participatory strategies such as intercultural dialogue to enhance the capacity of communities to be proactive in preventing mass atrocities. We can create coalitions of like-minded legislators from different parties and houses throughout their parliament to work together towards the prevention of mass atrocities and stabilization. Our goal should be to assist, provide insights, and help build states in the best interest of human rights and long-lasting peace. Let me also emphasize the need to continue these discussions to ensure that this dire situation in Afghanistan is not forgotten. A statement or a discussion may seem like very little in the face of
There's a online conference going on, so.
Sorry, a statement or a discussion may seem like very little in the face of the enormous atrocities being committed and the huge suffering of the people of Afghanistan, but let me tell you, it does help. When democracy was under attack in the Maldives from 2013 to 2018, when parliamentarians and opposition leaders were being jailed, it was the continuous support from the international community and the statements from organizations like PGA that kept us going. It was these statements and discussions that kept reminding President Yamin that the world was watching and that the world did not accept his undemocratic actions. And most of all, it was these discussions and statements that encouraged us to keep fighting another day, knowing that there were people all over the world rooting for us. This lifted our morale and kept us going until we were able to change our government in 2018 and bring back democratic rule to Maldives. In today's situation in Afghanistan also, ultimately it's the people of Afghanistan, the brave fighters like Honorable Mariam and Honorable Nazifa, who will bring the change. I believe it is our role as fellow parliamentarians to keep encouraging you to continue to fight without giving up, to assure you that we are with you all the way. And let me assure you, we are with you 100%. Finally, I encourage all participants here to read and commit to the action points adopted at the first roundtable to contribute to preventing new atrocities and containing the attacks committed against the Afghan people, including women, girls, boys, and minorities. The PGA Secretariat will be sharing these with you in the chat. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a long discussion, but thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Rosanna. I think you really summarized all the main points for action and for reflection and for action that came out of this meeting. Our commitment is to continue, never forget Afghanistan. And if I can just take out of the action points that you mentioned from our first two meetings, one thing very, very important to say. It is not true that the Taliban are applying the Sharia law. They are an anti-Islamic emirate because the Sharia law doesn't say that women cannot go to study, doesn't say that women have to have their face covered. This is not true. It's not written in the holy books. It's anti-Islamic. So we also have a duty to educate our public in our countries, whether they are a Muslim majority or not, that what the Taliban are doing is not motivated by religion. It's just motivated by fanatic beliefs against women and also children. So we have a lot of work to do. And thank you for staying with us an extra half an hour. And to the next appointment, hopefully in person, not only online. And the board of PGA will meet in New York in 4 days, and we'll have a lot of food for thoughts and for future action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee.